All right, happy Friday, everyone. I am coming to you from East Sandwich on location on Nye Pond. It is a lovely 5-acre pond here. And the important part about Nye Pond is that it connects over to the Nye Museum and Old Mill. So this is one of the early areas of American industry on Cape Cod. So I'm going to show you over at the mill, talk to the executive director, and hear a bit about how the United States responds to times of crisis. So let's paddle on over and see what we can learn. All right, here's the news. March 27th, as always, brought to us by tea. Shout out to Sheng Nung, who in 2732 BC, as the Emperor of China, was sitting outside when some leaves from a tree blew into his hot water, and he drank it and thought it was good. Thus, tea. Thank you, Shen Nung. For us, President Trump today, just a few minutes ago, signed a $2 trillion relief bill. Now, that is larger than the U.S. budget is annually, so this is a huge amount of money. So where is it going? Great question, you. We have the big one that a lot of people are talking about is the $1,200 that are going to go to families that earn less than $75,000 and $500 for every child in the household. We also have 13 weeks of jobless aid. Last week, 3.3 million Americans submitted jobless claims. So there's a lot of people unemployed. So this is really going to benefit those folks. That includes freelance and gig workers, which that kind of worker has yet to be included in a plan before. So this is big for those folks. There's $377 billion that are being given as loans to small businesses, specifically so that they can keep their employees employed. So certainly Cape Cod, we have a lot of small businesses here, so that's going to ensure that people are not losing their jobs. $500 billion is going to go to larger corporations in the form of loans, and they also are stipulating that they cannot lay off their employees either. There's another $100 billion that is going to hospitals, especially in areas like New York. We're seeing a huge surge in patients, and it's really important that they get the supplies that they need. Here in Massachusetts, we just had 800 new cases that were announced today. Once again, with the increase in testing, we're going to start seeing these numbers rise over the next couple of weeks. We're up to 35 deaths in the state, and our state, our country, in fact, has the most cases worldwide. We're close to 100,000. And if you look on this map, Massachusetts, we're over 3,000. And New York, though, is really the epicenter in the United States. And in fact, the world at this point, there's almost 45,000 cases in New York. And on Wednesday, I had a chance to talk to my buddy Jack, who lives in Manhattan. So what's going on, Jack?
I'm in New York right now, and I'm on the Upper East Side. It's weird. Here, let me show you. I mean, all those streets would normally be filled with traffic and everything.
Whoa, super empty. Also, nice view.
Yeah, it's not bad, right? No,
Yeah.
I got lucky on this one. You can actually see Yankee Stadium in the distance.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you been going out? Like, what are the streets like? Are you getting food and stuff? Just like Postmating?
You can get food easily enough. Last week it was crazy to get toilet paper to save your life, which is ridiculous. I'm on the Upper East Side right now, which is like the capital of like, you know, scared white entitled America. Yeah, so you had like, you know, what they're doing now is they're limiting sales, like, you know, one per person, one per family, or whatever, of like, you know, hot items, and like you got like these people complaining in the store, like, you know, literally just shouting at the manager. It's like, I need 10. It's like, no, you don't. No, you really don't.
Is Central Park like packed right now?
Relatively. I mean, it's always like kind of full. And like, you know, people like we're allowed to go out for like exercise, like, and that sort of thing, but they don't want people congregating in the park.
Yeah.
And like, so there's like, you know, some between people debate or what that constitutes. Like, you know, for example, if you pass by somebody like when you're on a jog, like, you know, is that breaking social distancing? It's just like, it's that sort of thing. People are a little jumpy out there, but like, you know,
I'd be interested to like look from above of like drone footage of seeing how people like navigate around people. Like there's some statistician right now that's like marking the path of people trying to avoid, like, how good are we at 6 feet right now?
Well, what they're talking about doing is, like in New York, is that they're going to close down a bunch of the streets so that people can walk down those. Because a very New York issue is that there's a lot of scaffolding and like sidewalk shelters up at all times, and that's like that's a city ordinance. It's supposed to protect you from like stone breaking off and like falling down.
Fair.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, you know, I mean, like, but like on the ground, they have the unfortunate effect of like, you know, sort of like, you know, acting like cow pens, like they'll crowd people in.
Oh yeah.
And, yeah, which isn't what you want right now, and I think that's where they're coming from with like the whole street thing.
Huh.
Yeah. The mafia is real disappointed because that's the scaffolding is their racket. I mean, like they'll just put up like, you know, build it like scaffolding in front of buildings that very clearly don't need it, and like, you know, it's like someone's paying for it. Yeah.
So as Jack mentioned, there's certainly been a rush on essentials like toilet paper. One thing that we should be happy about, though, is that we are no longer using things like corn cobs and rope ends, which just sounds wildly unpleasant, however fairly resourceful. But if you are worried that we're going to run short on essentials like food and toilet paper, and for hospitals run short on things like masks and gowns, well, there is something that is in place that allows the president to ensure that these are going to be provided for the American people. And in fact, the president did invoke it today. So he is forcing General Motors to produce ventilators. And this falls under something called the Defense Production Act. And to explain a bit more about the Defense Production Act, we're going to go over to Dr. Dave Shorten, who is the executive director of the Nye Museum.
The Defense Production Act was passed in 1950 during the Korean War. And just like in World War I and World War II, in order to mobilize for war, the United States needed to tap into all of its corporate capacity to manufacture necessary goods. And so the Defense Production Act gave the president wide authority to control industry. So in this country, we don't have socialism. We have private corporations that manufacture according to supply and demand. But the Defense Production Act intervenes in that balance and allows, in the case of an emergency, for the president to actually direct production of certain essential materials.
So what kind of essential materials initially? So in this act in the 1950s, is this mostly like munitions, or what kind of things are we talking about here?
Yeah, so there was very intimate cooperation among business and government during World War I and World War II in order to produce munitions, but also similar today, health supplies, to help soldiers on the battlefield. World War I and World War II were what you call total wars. So they required a whole diversity of products, and the entire country was expected to ration and buy into the war effort.
So this is a way to essentially get the businesses to buy into the war effort where the civilians are already doing so?
Yeah, exactly. So the reason that President Trump invoked the Defense Production Act last week was in the context of the coronavirus. I'm sure that many of your viewers have heard rumors about the shortages of supplies, ventilators, masks, gloves.
Yep.
And maybe if they've even seen grocery stores with empty shelves. And there's a lot of worry and concern going on about that. But I really wanted to come on the show today and try to assuage some of those fears and tell everybody that they have nothing to worry about. The Defense Production Act gives the president the ability to force businesses. I mean, force is a strong word because they're willing to do it, but to direct businesses to change what they produce now, consumer goods, and to begin producing masks and ventilators and gloves, and he can set quotas for that, and he can give interest-free loans so that corporations can extend their factories and begin to produce these kinds of things, and eventually that could very well apply to food as well. So I think when people see the store shelves emptying, they think that we're headed toward a every man for himself, prehistoric society. But really, what we're more headed toward something like World War II, where it was total warfare, and as the president said, it's an invisible enemy. And so, it's not that we're gearing up for a war against an enemy in a distant country, but rather we're going to gear up our manufacturing capacity through the president's intervention in order to produce all those supplies, so that companies like GE, which doesn't normally produce ventilators and masks and gloves, and which played a major role in World War I and World War II in producing munitions rather than electric appliances, for example. GE is going to, probably reorient toward making masks and ventilators and gloves. So there's nothing that anyone has to worry about.
All right. Thanks, Dave. So we are going to have all these things that the government is doing to help you, help the American people, help businesses. Now, how are you helping yourselves? Well, certainly a few of us are keeping entertained. One thing I have found is, number one, I've learned how to play harmonica. Nothing like some prison tunes to keep us entertained while at home. I've also been seeing some actual musicians on YouTube, #TogetherAtHome. There's been some great concerts. Hopefully you've seen a couple of them. The one that I first saw was Chris Martin of Coldplay playing some tunes. So there have been, since then, a bunch of different artists that have played some songs. So if you're bored, check that out. Also, if you're really bored, then you can check out some marble racing. This is something that actually I found last year, so I was a bit ahead of the curve on this. But if you want to look at some marble runs of marbles racing, this might be something for you. So we will check in with you next week, bring some more news. If you have questions, once again, email me, and I'll do what I can to answer them. Thanks, y'all.
Hey all, this is Mr. Vince. I hope this video finds you all happy, healthy, safe, practicing some good social distancing. Today, I want to walk you through what I found to be a really cool online history resource. Continue your learning, and you can do a lot of exploration on your own for a lot of really cool stuff. So this is done by the Chicago History Museum. I was there summer of 2018. Chicago History Museum is one of the best history museums I've ever been to in the United States or in other countries that I've visited. So if you Google Chicago History Museum and click on the first link, it'll be chicagohistory.org. It'll bring you to this main page. To get to the online exhibits, go to the tab at the top that says Exhibitions. Click Online Exhibitions. That will get you to a whole list of different things to explore. If you're interested in the 1960s and want to see how Chicago fit in with that, particularly the Democratic National Convention, a lot of things of that nature, go to Chicago Law and Disorder. That will bring you to this page, which has a lot of really cool narrative. It's got a lot of really cool pictures. There's also videos, and you can actually listen to them.
Plays a 9-string guitar. The only man in the world that plays a 9-string guitar. The only man in the world that has a 9-string guitar. Big Joe Williams.
So some really classic performances by Chicago blues artists from the 50s, 60s. We have a little Muddy Waters here, very famous.
Ladies and gentlemen, take a trip back to 1966 and meet the great Muddy Waters and his band.
So as you can see, you can explore different artists, read about them, see their pictures, watch videos of them performing, listen to their music. So if you're interested in like digging through some history of Chicago, these are some great resources. Again, there's probably about 10 or so different historical resources, everything from, the Civil War to public transportation in Chicago to music in Chicago and the African American experience and the Chicago blues that became super influential on rock and roll and later forms of music as well. So just some history stuff that you guys can explore on your own at home. And hope you guys are all doing great. And take care. We'll talk to you soon.
The Nye homestead was built in 1678, though the mill next door was built in 1669. One of the earliest structures in this area of Sandwich and really helped develop the economy around here. A blacksmith soon moved in, a fish hatchery, which was still operating through the 1980s for herring, where you can still, if you walk the grounds, visit the old mill, the old house, the Grange Hall, as well as some of those old fish hatchery areas that are now overgrown, but still pretty cool to wander around. So, if you're bored, check out the Nye Homestead and Museum.
Hello, Mr. Shea.
The old Dr. Dave. You got a nice vantage point over there.
Oh, not too bad. I'm sitting on top of the observation deck at the Nye Museum, overlooking the marsh here.
Heck yeah. The marsh that's right behind me, because we are practicing our social distancing right now.
That's right. Responsible communication in the time of COVID-19. I'm the executive director at the Nye Museum. I got my PhD at Boston University, and I sometimes do guest lecturing over there. Yeah, and I wrote my dissertation about a guy named Gerald Nye.
What role did he play?
Basically, he was against U.S. Participation in foreign wars, and he's most remembered for his opposition to U.S. Participation in World War II.
Ah, okay. What was his main reason to stay out of the war?
Well, he believed that the United States, for most of the 20th century, had been involving itself in what he would call wars for business. So the reason the U.S. would send the military abroad to places like Latin America or even Europe during World War I was in order to protect the United States' business interests.
So this pond behind me is artificial, right? This was not a natural pond?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, the town made the Nyes put in that pond in the late 1700s in order to regulate the herring run that was running through it. So that stream was a herring run.
Oh, okay. So nope.
Yeah.
Other finger. Yeah. Oh, almost there. Yeah. And then behind this building's the Grange Hall, old Grange Hall. When was that built?
That was built in 1889. That was built by a farm association trying to save local farmers on this part of the Cape.
Oh, okay. Was like most of this area of the Cape, and probably a lot of like my students that are in Marston's Mills, like that was all farmland.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but at the time that Benjamin Nye came out here and established the house that's right behind you in the view here in 1678, there were really no other farms out here.